Modulating up a half step from verse to chorus during congregational singing, is that possible? Yes, it is. This is an email I received from a reader probably last week, and I told her, I said, you know, this would make a great video. Her email reads, my song leader wants just the last time of singing the chorus to be raised a half step or a whole step. The problem is the chorus doesn't always start with a tonic chord like the verses do. Any suggestions would be appreciated. Good question there. And yes, you can modulate a half step for congregational singing, but with a few things in mind. Otherwise, it will be a total flop. I'll try to clarify when it's appropriate to modulate a half step up from verse to chorus. Since there are several different factors, I will split this into two videos. The first video will deal with modulating up a half step from the verse to the chorus. Part 2 of this series will deal with modulating up a whole step from the verse to the chorus. But I'll have a confession to make in that lesson I'll share with you later. So let's see how to modulate up a half step from verse to chorus. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 tips on transposing up a half step from verse to chorus. Number 1, in order to transpose up a half step, you need to end with a 1 chord and begin with a 1 chord. In other words, the last chord of your verse, last word, should be a 1 chord, and the first chord of the chorus should be the 1 chord. So if you're in the key of G, a G chord is the 1 chord. So look at your song. If it ends in a G chord, if it's in the key of G, and it ends on a G, and it begins on a G chord in the chorus, you know you've got a good one. Number 2, the modulation needs to last for the length of the last note in the verse. For example, if the last word in the verse is a whole note, then your modulation needs to last 4 counts worth. Keep this in mind though, in order to have time for the modulation to develop, your note duration at the end of the verse should be at least 3 beats, 3 or more beats, in order for the modulation to have developing time. Modulations lasting longer than the notes in the hymnal is more suitable for like a choir arrangement or other vocal arrangement with needing prior practice. Because if you try to add more beats than the written version of the hymnal, your congregation is going to be lost. It's like, when do we come in? Okay, the last tip, number 3, before I give it to you, just remember your congregation will not magically land on the correct note of the chorus after a key change unless the right hand during modulation gives a clear path leading to the note of the chorus. Now that I've shared these 3 tips with you, let's look at an example that I created of Oh How I Love Jesus. Before I play this example, notice the piece is in the key of G, G major. Look at the last word of the verse. Because he first loved me. Me lands on a G chord, and then you see a modulation chord, and then I land into the key of A flat major, because A flat major is a half step above G major. And the chord is an A flat major chord, which would be the 1 chord for A flat. So it's still going from a 1 chord to a 1 chord, even with a key change. Notice as I play, you'll hear the right hand leading into the new key. No time was lost. The whole piece just kept moving like normal. It's just there was a key change. The magical chord that I use for most of my modulations is the 5/7 chord of the new key, the key I'm approaching. So you have to start thinking of the key you're approaching before you get there in your modulation process. So I end on the 1 chord of the present key I'm in, and then notice that natural octave in the left hand. Look again at the line. And the third on the measure of the word me. In the left hand you see a F natural octave. Normally it would have been sharped in the key of G, but make it a natural, and it leads real well into the E flat 7 chord, 5-7 chord, and then smoothly takes me into the new key of A flat major. I hope these tips have been helpful to you for learning to modulate up a half step from the verse to the chorus. And the same process can take place at the end of the chorus leading into the next verse as well, as long as you're going from a 1 chord to a 1 chord. Keep that in mind. So for tip number 1 was make sure you're going from a 1 to a 1 chord. Number 2, make sure your modulation lasts as long as the note duration at the end of the verse, the last word of the verse. And tip number 3, make sure your right hand leads the singers directly into the new key by just stepping up. Sometimes the note may be lower in the chorus that you're reaching for, so you might have to climb down towards it. It's not always going to be a note up higher than where you finished. In order to see that example where you're going to go down with the right hand to lead him into the new note, I've provided a free PDF, and it's just a page of 4 examples, 4 different hymns with different scenarios, so that you can take this sheet and try to apply the same ideas to other hymns of like nature. Part 2 is coming soon, and I have a confession to make in part 2. So, till we meet again, bye.